You're here with Season 4 of Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe meet to empower you to succeed. My name is Hoda, and our guest today is Dr. Marcelo Staricoff.
All schools should launch the academic year with what I call a Learning to Learn week. When children realize that in order to learn something new, you have to not know it first, it completely transforms their way of thinking about the process of learning. Every child has everything in them, and it's just how we provide the conditions in which they can flourish and demonstrate it.
Thanks again for joining me in Hoda's Career Info, your career program where guests from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. Watch, listen, and learn. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. More importantly, make sure you have that very important career conversation with a career professional. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info is the author of The Joy of Not Knowing, Dr. Marcelo Staricoff. A former scientist and primary school head teacher, Dr. Marcelo is currently a lecturer in education at the University of Sussex and joint course leader of the BA Primary and Early Years program. He has recently worked on behalf of UNICEF with policymakers, educators, and textbook writers to help implement a reformed national curriculum in Uzbekistan. Dr. Marcelo also works for Coram, a children's charity, runs courses, and acts as an advisor to a number of schools and educational organizations. He speaks regularly at national and international events on the principles that underpin the Joy of Not Knowing's philosophy of education and school leadership. Dr. Marcelo is also the author of Start Thinking, and he has published widely in the fields of creative, critical, multilingual, multicultural, and philosophical thinking and learning in the classroom. He is a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Education and a trustee of the Laurel Trust and chair of the Michael Aldrich Foundation. Marcelo's work and his contributions to education were recognized in 2019 by being named as a founding fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, and in 2023 when he became a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Thank you so much for joining me and Dr. Staricoff. Stay tuned as Marcelo talks about the Joy of Not Knowing approach, its benefits in the classroom, and so much more. Welcome, Marcelo Staricoff, to Hoda's Career Info. I really appreciate your time and I appreciate the time difference that got us going. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be on here, Hoda. It's a real dream come true, and I'm really, really looking forward to the next hour or so with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I appreciate that, Marcelo. And I will start with the first question that I ask all guests, and that is, what is the term that best describes the work that you do, and how would you define it? So from your perspective, Marcelo, not from the dictionary perspective.
Sure. Well, if I may, I will describe three. I sort of wear three. I'm wearing three hats at the moment. The principal one is a lecturer in education at the University of Sussex on the initial teacher training course. So there's a 3-year BA program for students who want to become primary school teachers. And I'm a joint course lead on that at the moment. So that's really exciting. The second one is the terminology would be consultant. So I work through the work that I have been developing in education which is now known as The Joy of Not Knowing, with various schools, various organizations, policymakers, nationally and internationally. So it's on that kind of consultancy role. And the third one, if I may, Hoda, is being an author. I have now amazingly published 2 books. The first one I published very, very early on in my career as a teacher, called Start Thinking, which is a collection of creative thinking starters and challenges that are designed to welcome the children in with in the mornings as they come into the classroom. So to launch the day with a really interesting, motivating, inspiring challenge for them to do in the morning. So that's called Start Thinking. It's just a collection of all of those. That was in 2005. And recently, and it's now 3 years old, it's just had its 3rd birthday, is the publication of The Joy of Not Knowing, which is, as you can see, it's just behind me there, which is, as we'll mention a little bit later on, but it's a collection of my whole philosophy of education that I have been developing since entering primary school education as a teacher, and until recently as a head teacher. So it's a philosophy of education and of school leadership, very interestingly. So it's written from the perspective of a teacher and also a senior leader and a head teacher. So these are the three terms, if I'm allowed 3.
You're allowed as many as you like, Marcelo. And we will be talking about the book a little bit more detailed in a bit. I just want to take you back to the term consultant. And again, just to educate the audience, what does a consultant do? Or how would you define the role from your experience working as a consultant?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Everyone frames their role in the best way that they feel. For me, it is a very, very collaborative, very involved, and very supportive, and very kind of based on modeling lots and lots of ideas for schools to embark on. So I do a lot of what we call in Britain in-service days, sort of professional development training for teachers, and set lots of thoughts in motion. So my idea of consultancy is not to present a ready-made product, but to really look at the context, the values, the vision, the dreams of every school, every organization, including policy-making bodies, and try to build on what they're doing to achieve their next steps. So it's a little bit, what I love doing is creating lots of thought-provoking conversations and discussions, and enabling the people to, in their own ways, of getting excited about their next steps, and also to share with them, I guess, a lot of ideas that I know from experience, from very personal. It's all based on very personal experience that have created really magical moments, either in the classroom or with the families or within the school staff team. So they're all ideas based on real life scenarios that have what I call created those magical moments that that make us realize why we are in education for. But also apart from that direct contact, I have loved working recently as a consultant on behalf of UNICEF to help. I'm working with the Department of Education in Uzbekistan, who are just introducing what's called a reformed curriculum, and their reformed curriculum is incredibly exciting, and it's based on developing a really wonderful learning to learn culture in the classrooms, and presenting the curriculum in a way which enables the children to think critically and creatively, and where education enables them to develop a real love of learning in terms of developing that sort of sense of lifelong learning. So in that case, it was very, very different, because it was, trying to really see how there's completely different society and culture, and to mine, and but trying to see how these concepts can become, not established, but embedded within the practice of in different contexts. So that was very, very interesting indeed.
I appreciate your willingness to take on this detailed question. It's just I like people to hear, like, learn more about what consultants do. I appreciate the examples you provided as well. So thank you so much for taking this on.
Pleasure.
Again, as part of educating the audience about career journeys and how they take turns and what got you to the work that you do you mind sharing with the audience your story, and perhaps embedded within the lesson that you learned that you'd like to share by being here?
Yes, no, that's really fascinating, Hoda. I have a very interesting story to tell, I think, which started by being born in Argentina. And we came over as a family in 1976 when I was 11. And really interestingly, if we're thinking about students who we are encouraging to put themselves in positions of discomfort and challenge. When I came over to the UK, I arrived in July 1976 without speaking any English at all. And within a few weeks, so the first kind of days in September, I started secondary school in North London, in the first year of secondary school. Again, with very, very little language and feeling quite lost. But I think the message today is feeling excited of the opportunities that I was being given. So realizing the whole time that I was in London, and it was just an amazing opportunity. So I think it's really important to, whenever we are in situations of discomfort, to feel and to realize maybe how lucky we are at the same time. So embracing those opportunities very soon and making friends, and being nurtured by the wonderful teachers, I very soon picked up the language. And I really, funnily, I ended up then, which is also a great story for our audience. I went through the whole school, the secondary school part, which then also included the 2 years of pre-university, which we call the sixth form here. So there's two pre when we do the A levels that then give you the qualifications to go to university. So I stayed in the school for that, and then I took a year out before going to university, and incredibly, I worked in that. I then became a member of staff in that school as a lab technician. So I was the biology technician for 3 months, and I just can't tell you, if you think back to how I arrived in July of 76 to then actually become a member of staff and enjoy it enormously. So that was a really, really lovely story. And then may be interesting as well for the audience, the rest of that year, I was in Boston as a nanny for a family. So looking after 2 children, and loving absolutely every minute of my time in Boston, and got very addicted to the Red Sox, which I still follow very avidly. So that was really interesting. Then I came back to start my degree at the University of Sussex. And again, as the story from the school where I came, and then I was a member of staff, I was an undergraduate at Sussex in 1984 to 1987, and I'm back now there as a lecturer. So I am currently at Sussex again, where I work. So this is where I came to as an undergraduate. So that's really, really, really interesting as well, how it's all come full circle. And I did a degree in environmental science, and then I worked for 1 year for the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, which is part of the civil service in England. So there was a kind of natural step from my degree. And in those days, environmental science was a very, you can imagine, very, very progressive degree. It was the first time it was being offered at the university. And so I was the cohort that launched that degree, which was really, really fascinating in 1984. And then whilst working for the Ministry of Agriculture, I decided to start to look for opportunities to do a little bit of scientific research. My mum was a research scientist, and I always thought that that would be a really lovely thing to try and pursue. And I answered an advert on the back of the New Scientist, which is the magazine where all the PhDs are above. And I remember going to the London Hospital, the medical unit in London Hospital, and being welcomed beautifully and so warmly by Professor Bob Cohen, and who on the spot said, "Great, you can come and start your PhD here in September." So it was a PhD looking at how lactic acid moves in and out of the liver cells. So transport, how the liver cells enable lactic acid to be transported inside, and then it gets converted to glucose within. So I was looking at lactic acid entry into liver cells, and it was really fascinating within the medical unit. And I then applied and got what's called a postdoctoral position in Bristol. So I continued my career as a scientist for another 5 years, but then I switched to red blood cells. So I was looking at the interaction. The red blood cells have got a membrane, an outer membrane, but they also have a cytoskeleton, and they're linked, and that makes them very flexible. So our red blood cells sometimes have to get through capillaries that are an eighth of the size of the cell, so they have to squeeze themselves through those capillaries and then bounce back into shape. And when that interaction between the cell membrane and the cytoskeleton goes wrong, which is what I was looking at, the cell cannot bounce back, and it lyses, and and people become, don't have enough red blood cells. So really, really fascinating. And then after 5 years of that, I realized that pure scientific research probably wasn't going to be my career forever. And our first child was born, and it was interesting for audience as well. It was very much based on sort of short-term grants, and it wasn't giving me that security. And I guess when we started with our family, with that sense of needing a more secure position came about. And I've always loved helping in primary schools. I've always loved education. I've always lost that sense, the sense of teaching. So I decided to retrain as a primary school teacher. I think I was 30 at the time, for a year in Bristol. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I've just loved every minute of the retraining degree, and every minute since. And then following that, I was incredibly lucky again in Bristol to land into a first school that gave me an enormous amount of opportunities in terms of professional development, and started to link. What was really interesting, Hoda, was that I started to link my training as a scientist with the job of a primary school teacher. And it was absolutely fascinating how I started to want to develop the conditions in the classroom which would enable the children to feel that they were research scientists. So, with that, I mean that I wanted them to come in every day and have that sense of wanting to explore and to play and to find things out. Exactly how a scientist thinks every day when they go into it. Do you see? There's a really, really lovely combination there of having that, of trying to set that up, rather than viewing education as imparting of the knowledge. So it was that sense of getting the children to feel excited about developing knowledge through play and exploration and discovery. So I think that sort of scientific training, I really recommend to anyone listening. If anybody can develop, maybe not through a PhD and a postdoc, but a sense of delve into how scientists think, and the mind, how scientists are always excited to work on things that nobody knows the answers to. That sense of wanting to find things out and very importantly as well, to contribute to society, because scientists are always trying to find solutions to problems that we have in society. So yeah, that whole training as a scientist was fantastic. And then my second school in Bristol was really, really key, Westbury Park, where my whole philosophy of education that I was starting to develop started to really gel. And I started to become very involved with lots of other people who were doing incredibly exciting things at the time around creative thinking, critical thinking, philosophy with children. We did a fantastic project with the University of Bristol looking at lifelong learning and the lifelong learning dispositions. I wrote a chapter in the book, Powerful Learning in Practice, where I describe how in primary education one can present the curriculum in a way that not only imparts knowledge, but develops children's lifelong learning skills. And today that's really, really powerful, isn't it? To be thinking that in education, you're being trained from a very early age with all the dispositions that will then enable you to succeed later on in life, because you are resilient and creative and collaborative and strategic, and all this, and it's amazing. And I'm really delighted because that is now in place in so many schools. And we developed the idea of linking them to an animal. So schools now have like the resilient tortoise, for example, and children really kind of can see through the animals how the disposition works and what it means, which is really, really, really powerful. And then another really fascinating thing happened. My wife got a job in Brighton, which is completely by chance. So we came back to Brighton. I say came back because I was here at university. And I took the opportunity to move on to senior leadership. So I became a deputy head of a really, really interesting school with when I arrived, with lots of challenges in terms of attendance, behavior, there was a sense of firefighting rather than of love of learning. And incredibly, Hoda, then coming with all that background of developing classroom cultures based on values and children's rights and lifelong learning and creative thinking, I've started to have an influence in the school, and it was just really, really transformed itself. And the belief that those children started to have in themselves and in the value of education was just really, really tremendous. And then I took the step to headship, which is just an absolutely wonderful thing to have happened. And I became the head of Hertford Infants and Nursery School. And that is where there's everything that I had been working on took shape, because it not only was based on the ideas that can work in the classroom, but the similar ideas then I used to create strategic leadership structures within the school where everybody shared in the magic of education and the possibilities that can happen. So I developed lots and lots of ideas based around teachers working in inquiry teams and collaboratively, and doing lots of research in action. So they were researching as they were teaching and finding out the right evidence and adapting how. What I always say, Hoda, is that everything I love doing with children and giving them that sense of intellectual playfulness and sense of being able to learn through play, I wanted to offer to the teachers as well and to the staff as well. And really interestingly, for this thinking about our time together today, Hoda, what I developed, which if people are listening in terms of their careers and how I value everyone equally, I developed this concept called multi-professional teams to drive the strategic direction of the school forward. So at the start of every year, I would present the main areas that we were focusing on as a school. And every single member of staff, everyone, the cleaners, the caretakers, the clerical, every member of staff chose one of those 4 teams for the year. So they worked in these multi-professional teams, driving each priority forward. So it wasn't coming from me, it wasn't coming from senior leadership, it was coming from everyone in the school, had a sense of ownership of how the school was progressing. And it was just amazing. It was all the best ideas come from the people who are actually working on the ground level every single day and seeing, and everyone have feeling that they have the voice to contribute to how the school was progressing was incredibly exciting. And then every term I would set up the conditions where they would all focus on a research area and then feedback, and so it's that kind of a real sense of excitement within the school, and that's where the phrase "the joy of not knowing" got coined. And following my second headship at a large primary school, when I came out of that headship, I came out with the opportunity to write, to put it all together and write the book, which has now become a very exciting achievement to have got to. And then following the writing of the book, I then approached the department at Sussex. So while I was ahead, I was seconded to University of Brighton, which is just across the road. So I was already sort of doing a little bit of lecturing. But I approached the University of Sussex and they welcomed me with open arms. So I've been there now for 4 years as a lecturer in education on the primary and early years course with qualified teacher status. So I guess that brings us quite up to date with the journey.
Thank you for sharing it. And I love it. I love that journey because I could see the career, like I'm thinking from a career learning perspective, I could see the career exploration that allowed you to develop these values that are important to you, and definitely heard your passion about the work that you're doing. So thank you
Yes,
so much for sharing your journny,
it's a
Marcelo.
pleasure. It's lovely to share it with people. And I was thinking thinking about the program today, that it's really interesting that it was quite non-linear. So if we're encouraging young students to think about, not to worry about having to have the absolute ideal thing right at the beginning, or just starting, and then there are always opportunities to fluctuate and move and follow instincts or excitements that may be developing later on. So not to be worried about the launch.
Absolutely. And then, your willingness to retrain, that lifelong learning, when you
Mm,
went into the education
mm,
field. So, like these are all
yeah.
important messages, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. It's never too late. Yeah. And I sometimes joke with my wife that there's so many other professions I might I really want to try even now to retrain us. So yeah, I think it's really, really important to always have that open mindset that people can achieve, that anything and everything is possible. I always say that to the children, that if we live through a values-based approach, anything and everything becomes possible.
Absolutely agree, and I thank you for this message, Marcelo. Marcelo,
Pleasure.
I want to take you back to your book that you mentioned early on, "The Joy of Not Knowing," or the way I found it was through the hashtag JONK or junk. It is trending on LinkedIn, and here's what I read about it. It's described as a practical guide that shows how all students can thrive and develop the dispositions of successful lifelong learning and global citizens. So, what would you like the audience to know about the book?
So the key messages within the book, I think I can dilute to three sort of main key messages. One of them is that the book gives practitioners a tool and a model with which to inspire children and learners, because there's no age given, so people finding it really useful across all ages, to be able to remove those barriers that come to all of us as human beings when we find ourselves in a position of not knowing. So that's the real basis for it. And I found from my teaching that when we do that in the classroom, then children's motivation just grows so much, because I've always been fascinated in that very initial positioning of the learning, and the things that tend to, in a lot of cases, prevent children or us or any of us engaging with the activity in the first place. So I developed the idea of and coined the phrase "the joy of not knowing," because once you get the children to realize that in order to learn something new, you have to not know it first, it becomes really transformational. Because the usual scenario, Hoda, in classrooms or in life is that if like you're doing to me now, you ask me a question, I feel really emotionally comfortable knowing the answer to your questions. Yeah. When we ask children a question, they want to be able to, they put their hand up and they want to be able to answer. They're really happy when they know the answer to the question. So very early on in the process of establishing a joy of not knowing culture in schools, children are introduced to the fact that if they already know the answer to a question, they're in fact not learning anything new. So although it makes us feel emotionally comfortable, we're not progressing with the learning. And it's amazing to think how many lessons tend to be driven by teachers asking children questions and children putting their hands up, getting the answer right and moving on. So a lot of the time, it's really interesting to think, a lot of the time when you get to the end, you think how much new learning has taken place and how much do the children already know. So when children realize that in order to learn something new, you have to not know it first, it completely transforms their way of thinking about the process of learning. And instead of being worried and anxious that they're in a position of not knowing, they suddenly become very enthusiastic in being there, because they realize that is the only opportunity they have to be able to learn. So they become enthusiastic. They want to be in a position of knowing so that they can get to know. Does that make sense? But I guess there's a lot of, in the journal, there's a lot of discussing these things openly with children and developing that language of learning, and what's in education referred to as metacognition. So thinking about what you know, and thinking about what you want to know next. So it's all those kinds of concepts. So removing those barriers is absolutely key to engaging. And then what hopefully the audience will see if through the book is that once you engage the child to become intrinsically motivated to want to engage with the learning, then that's where all the magic starts to happen. But it has to be accompanied by creating the conditions and the cultures in classrooms that make children feel safe, that they are working within a very supportive mechanism. So by placing them in a position of not knowing and telling them, you have to accompany that by saying, well, it's brilliant to not know, and here you have everything you need to be able to succeed. So it's that combination of the two that makes children really want to thrive. And then what's really interesting when you combine those two is that children start to love to know how to know what they wish to know that they know they don't know. And that's the essence to how the philosophy is introduced in the book. So if we can get children to want to know, to realize that they're able to know how to know, so they feel secure with all the resources, all the dispositions, all the working collaboration, they know that they are able to know how to know what they wish to know, which is that intrinsic motivation, that they know they don't know, which is that metacognitive process. It's really interesting, isn't it, to think that once you start to realize that there's something you don't know, you have a choice in life. So you might not know what the capital of Argentina is, but you might not be interested. So, when you realize that there's, so we always place children in a position of not knowing. That's the purpose of education, always moving them on to the next step. But as human beings, they have a choice. They might not be interested, they might want to know what the teacher says you don't know, or they might not be interested in knowing. So it's making that process, shifting that process to always making the children feel through the personalization and the excitement and the playfulness, making them always feel, oh yes, I know I don't know this, and I really want to know it. It's a very exciting position to place children in. And then very, very interestingly, Hoda, when the children then work through the knowing, the sort of the learning bits, and then getting to the answer or to a solution to a problem, they then climb out. This is all based on a pit model. So they go into the pit to the learning, then they climb out when they've done their learning. When they climb out, they have a new knowledge. But what the book does is it says that knowledge is not enough. And the real excitement in education and learning is to then couple the new knowledge with a sense of understanding, having a really deep understanding of that knowledge. And then once you have that understanding, to give the children the idea of needing wisdom. I love that word, to give them wisdom that enables them to be able to use that knowledge. Then the purpose of education is then complete, because I believe very strongly that the purpose of education is to create individuals who are able to add cultural capital to society. And that's a phrase that's very, very close to my heart and was developed by one of my real idols, who unfortunately died last year, John West Burnham, an amazing, amazing person. I don't know if you've heard of him, Hoda, but he used to talk a lot about the purpose of education being to develop individuals who are able to add cultural capital to society, and I really love that. So the removing the barriers, the developing that intrinsic motivation to want to learn rather than doing it for an extrinsic reward or for the teacher, that intrinsic motivation, and to equip the students with all they need to be able to thrive, not only in now, but also in their future, is what the book is, you know, those are the three main concepts. And then what it does is it provides teachers and senior leaders and head teachers, so it's written from the perspective of all people that work in schools or in educational establishments. It provides them with a very practical way of introducing this into their everyday practice. And it suggests, which is really interesting, and the all-party parliamentary group on education, which I'm a member of, have now taken this idea on in their latest publication, which is a little book called Reimagining Education in England. And that is that I propose in the book that all schools, and it'd be fascinating to know how in Canada this may or may not resonate, all schools should launch the academic year with what I call a Learning to Learn week. So the middle two chapters of the book are dedicated to how to establish a Learning to Learn week, where the school moves away from curriculum, but just teaches the children for 5 days, or 5 nominal days, but it could be more, it could be less, on how to become effective learners and how to create, and that's also an opportunity to create those cultures in the classroom that enables every child to feel that they can thrive. And it takes the reader through what you were doing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And those days are normally given to, so day one is all about models of learning. So the children develop their own model of learning and they have their own way of describing how they view learning themselves, which is a really fascinating concept. So some say it's like going into a maze. I go in, I don't know where the answer, you know, the exit is, but eventually I get there. So or some say it's like climbing a ladder, you know, I learn by climbing one step at a time, or, you know, just lots and lots of amazing ideas. One child reception said, for me, it's like a volcano. When I'm learning, it's like all the lava is bubbling, and then when I learn, the volcano evolves. You know, it's all sorts of amazing things. But for every child to be able to articulate how they feel about learning and the learning process, how they perceive it, is really, really transformational. And then they all go up on the wall, and the teacher uses those, the language of each of the models to communicate with the children in a very personalized way. So I'll say whereabouts in the maze. They're all really, really easy ideas, but it just makes it so exciting to have this kind of rich language of this around the process of learning, always paramount in the classroom. Then the second day is given to creative thinking. So giving children lots of strategies with which to develop their thinking creatively. And that's where the thinking skill starters are introduced, you know, the challenges in the morning. Then the third day is all about visible learning and thinking. So giving the children lots of strategies in which they can demonstrate their thinking visibly. So mind maps and concept lines and fortune. So it's all kind of mapping out their thinking visibly, which is really, really amazing. And it becomes very inclusive, because the whole point of the Joy of Not Knowing is that every child, I believe that every child is amazing. Every child has everything in them, and it's just how we provide the conditions in which they can flourish and demonstrate it and communicate it. And the fourth day is my real passion, which we may need a whole new broadcast for, which is doing philosophy with children. So the idea of presenting the curriculum philosophically and training the students to have philosophical discussions in the classroom is so incredible, Hoda. I can't tell you. It's just the most amazing thing that I think I've ever discovered and developed and come across and used and still use to promote that real love of learning, of thinking. And what I love about the philosophy which your with children approach or idea is that in philosophy, the children, no one knows the answer. So I love all the things that move away from the children thinking the teacher has the answers. And so it's just discussing things together. It's just the most powerful thing to build human beings of the future, I think, through the curriculum. So I can give you some examples if you wish later on, but it's my idea is that every lesson can start with a philosophical question, which is really interesting. And then interestingly for us, the fifth day is given over to the lifelong learning disposition. So all the students, all the children are introduced to what it is to be an effective lifelong learner and how that then can be implemented within the daily life of the classroom. Then the next chapters go into some of those strategies in more detail, but then chapter 11, which is the last chapter and probably the most special one, introduces a concept that I've developed to make sure that the richness with which every child comes into the classroom becomes part of how the classroom functions. So I guess that comes from my background. It's called multilingual thinking in multicultural classrooms. And that's the idea of that is that I present a model for teachers to be able to deliver the curriculum in a way that enables the children to engage using all the repertoire of language that they have, not just the language of instruction. And it's so amazingly exciting. If a child has, every child has so much culture and so much heritage and so much language within them. I propose the idea that it's fascinating to not restrict them to just the language of instruction and allow them to engage with all the language that they possess. Nelson Mandela once said, if you talk to a person in the language of instruction, it goes to their head. If you talk to them in their language, it goes to their heart. It really interestingly, if I'm writing poetry now, if I write anything emotional, I still write it in Spanish. So for me, it's how it's engaging the emotional side of children is so important. It's been shown that a bilingual, multilingual classroom benefits even the monolingual child because they just immersed in it's just so much language and talk, communication, dialogue, conversations. It's all the richness that one could wish for. So that's the kind of basis of the book, and what I like people to think about when they think about the joy of not knowing, and hopefully when they look through the ideas in the book, is that it's like a potter's wheel. So you start with the wheel, and you start everyone starts with the same block of clay, and then which is the curriculum, and then the book enables the practitioner to shape the curriculum in their own. Everyone ends up with their own work of art, which is totally unique. And I feel that's what the book does. It is not to deliver the lump of clay as it is. It's to deliver the lump of clay when it becomes personalized work of art. So it enables you to build on what you already do and bring in lots of ideas and things. And it also has a very strong, powerful message of how to involve the families in that sort of triangular partnership between the school, the child, and the family, which is so key to the whole process. Yeah, so those are the kind of main messages that I try to portray in writing the book. And there's full of examples from children's work. So it's quite unique because lots of books in education are quite theoretical, but this one is it describes the theory and ideas for embedding in practice, but then it shows you what children have achieved. There's just full of amazing things that I still can't believe that the children were doing in the classroom and achieving. So yeah, my whole life is in there. So yeah.
I loved your approach. I mean, I read about it on LinkedIn posts and reviews, and I really want to congratulate you on what you have accomplished so far. It is amazing. Schools in Canada do need this approach as well, and the students need it, in my belief in the value of lifelong learning in order to find career success. My last question for you, Marcelo, what are some of the ideas or projects going for you that you would like to accomplish?
Hoda, I think that's that sense of, as we said, if we can instill that sense of being like a scientist, so you're always seeking the unknown. It would be a fascinating message from our conversation to gift young people. I would also say for young people listening and thinking about their futures is I've always found it incredibly valuable to have very inspirational role models as people that I just value so much, whoever they may be. And there's a really lovely exercise in the book where children are asked, one of the thinkers who starts is to think of their role models, and it could be famous people, it could be their family, it could be friends, it could be anyone, but just to have that sense of having a really deep sense of why they are role models to an individual is really, really powerful. And then valuing and trying to imitate the things that we value in them, I think would be a really lovely message for them to have. And then also the other message I just wanted to send out is if we can say that from today, we can encourage people to not think that knowledge is the end product. So, and more and more and more knowledge is becoming less relevant, with IT and, everything. We can get knowledge much more easily than we used to be able to. But to think of knowledge as the first step in then developing a really thorough understanding and a playful approach around what that new knowledge means, with the aim of then developing the wisdom with which to use that in a way that benefits people and society. So that's message I think would be, there's so many people and so many students, there's so many times and still in education is, have they got the right answer and a tick, and then it just moves on to, do you see, I want to move away. I want people to move away just from thinking that getting the right answer is the end product or the end goal. But to answer your question, Hoda, in terms of placing myself currently in positions of challenge and a little discomfort, there are 2 or 3 things that I'm pursuing. I've offered at the university to take on the job of supervising master students. So currently I lecture undergraduates and I teach a little bit on the postgraduates. So I've been given a module for next year, which is part of a master's module. So I will be leading a master's module, and to think that I now have to completely, see how to run a master's module and also supervise 3 master's students at the same time. So becoming involved in that sort of that high, completely different realm of university life is a real challenge. And the other one, I know I mentioned John West Burnham just now, and the influence that he had in my life was so enormous. We've worked in the last 25 years just so closely together. The last conversation I had with him, he said to me, Marcel, I've got one more book in me. and I want to write it with you. And incredibly, Hoda, it was going to be called From Knowledge to Wisdom, because he was really fascinated by the impact that education could have, which is when you start to look at what is beyond knowledge. So I guess with everything that's happening, that seems to be my next natural challenge, to try and write the book on his behalf, just try and put it together, which would be an incredible challenge, to try and portray what he was trying to say and combine it with lots of the ideas that we developed together. And the other thing is that my head of department and I have just been successful in getting a grant to go and work in Uzbekistan for a week or so with the Bukhara Pedagogical Institute in Bukhara. I've never been. I've no idea how it would be. It's one of those things that you think you have to throw yourself into a completely unknown scenario, but one which I'm looking forward to with great excitement. But those, I guess, those are the sort of projects along the way now, all of which involve a little bit of the unknown.
Thank you, Marcelo, for taking on all these challenges and putting yourself out of your comfort zone in these opportunities. I look forward to seeing what you're going to accomplish with them. And
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time and all the fabulous tips you shared with me today. Truly appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been so wonderful, Hoda. Absolutely wonderful chatting. And I really look forward to hopefully lots of conversations with the listeners. If anybody wants to carry on chatting or anything at all, please get in touch. I will love that.
This is it for Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info was Dr. Marcelo Staricoff. You can connect with Dr. Marcelo Staricoff on LinkedIn. Marcelo shared that when children realize that in order to learn something new, you have to not know it first, it completely transforms their way of thinking about the process of learning. Take the time to pause, re-listen to the episode, and share your thoughts on the value of not knowing approach for yourself or for the students or clients you work with. Remember that you can listen to Hoda's Career Info since it's also dropped as a podcast. To let me know if you are interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. I am your host, Hoda. Until next time, remember, your time is valuable. How are you spending it?